Good day, everyone. Up next, we have a presentation by Samuel Wong Bo-Ching, who will be speaking on one of the most important foundations of equitable jurisprudence, which is the maxims of equity. These maxims have guided court for centuries and have continued to shape how fairness, conscience, and justice operate within modern legal systems. Samuel here today will be walking us through the key maxims, their historical background, and how they apply in both English and Malaysian law today. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Samuel as he presents on the maxims of equity.
Good day, everyone. Today, I'll be discussing three foundational maxims of equity. Equity will not suffer a wrong to be without remedy. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. And equity looks to the intent rather than the form. Through this presentation, I aim to explore the historical origins, the critical significance in legal development, and how they continue to shape modern law in society. Equity has long served as a vital component to the common law, ensuring that rigid rules or technical shortcomings do not defeat justice. Even though statutes and codified procedures dominate in modern legal systems, equitable principles remain essential safeguards of fairness, morality, and conscience. Equity is not merely a law supplement, it's a living, adaptive system ensuring that the law functions in accordance with justice, not formalism alone. Lilienter and Muhammad Hussain 2020 highlight a key challenge, which states equitable maxims are often stated without reasoned elaboration, which can obscure their practical operation. This reminds us that understanding the application of these maxims requires careful analysis of both case law and contemporary practice, not mere mechanical memorizations. Now, let's begin with the first maxim. Equity will not suffer a wrong to be without a remedy. This maxim expresses equity's fundamental purpose to provide relief where common law remedies are inadequate, unavailable, or overly technical. The Latin phrase, ubi jus ibi remedium, where there is a right, there is a remedy, perfectly captures this principle. Historically, common law courts were constrained by rigid writs and procedural formalities, often leaving claimants without recourse for legitimate grievance. The court chancery emerged to fill these gaps, guided by conscience and the moral authority of the chancellor. As Lord Selborne LC observed in Norton against Lord Ashburton, 1914, equity arose to supplement and correct the common law in areas where it failed to deliver complete justice. The Maxim's operation is illustrated in Redeployed 1948, where the deceased closest relative were allowed to recover estate funds that had been mistakenly distributed to charities. Even though no common law claim was available, similarly in Bannister against Bannister 1948, the court imposed a constructive trust to uphold an oral promise allowing a widow to reside in the property for life, refusing to let the defendant exploit statutory formalities as an engine of fraud. Bay 2019 emphasizes that equitable remedies form an integrated system where constraints like the clean hands doctrine ensure that the relief is granted coherently rather than arbitrarily, underscoring that equity operates as a structure, principle system rather than a case by case solution. However, equity is not unbounded. In Holmes and against Millage 1893, the court refused to appoint a receiver over wages that were legally protected and unattachable. This decision illustrates a crucial limitation. While equity aims to remedy injustice, it does not override clear statutory protections. Equity operates alongside the law, not above it, and will not intervene where Parliament or the common law has expressly set boundaries. The case is a reminder that equity functions as a complement to the legal system, respecting existing legal rights even when a claimant seeks an equitable remedy. In Malaysia, this principle remains highly relevant. In Takako and Sako against Pek Yuan 2009, the federal court applied a resulting trust to allow the plaintiff to recover her financial contribution, despite procedural non-compliance with the National Land Court. Although the NLC imposes strict requirements for dealings involving land, the court recognized that rigid adherence to procedure should not defeat genuine contributions made in good faith. By evoking a resulting trust, the court upheld substantive justice while still respecting the statutory framework. The decision demonstrates that Malaysian courts are willing to use equitable principles to fill gaps, correct unfairness, and prevent one party from retaining benefits unjustly so long as they do not contradict the NLC's core structural requirements. Griffin 2020 supports this approach, arguing that equity must balance certainty and flexibility, ensuring that substantive justice prevails even when statutory rules are insufficient or incomplete. His points highlights the modern role of equity as an adaptive mechanism, one that operates carefully with legal limits but steps in where strict rules lead to outcomes that are inconsistent with fairness. This reinforces that Malaysian courts, while bound by statutory frameworks, continue to evoke equity where necessary to prevent injustice arising from rigid or outdated legal provisions. In today's world, this maxim is more important than ever. Many contemporary issues such as mistaken cryptocurrency transfers, automated contractual errors, digital identity theft, and algorithm generated fraud fall outside the traditional imagination of legislations. Statutes often lag behind technological advancements, leaving gaps in protection. Here, equity becomes indispensable. Flexible, equitable remedies such as restitution, injunctions, constructive trust, and equitable tracing allow courts to respond to new forms of harm without waiting for legislative updates. For example, tracing principles can be extended to digital assets, and constructive trust can be imposed to prevent wrongdoers from benefiting from digital fraud or mistaken transfers. The maxim not only guarantees a remedy, but also prevents the law from being weaponized. Without equitable intervention, a defendant could hide behind technicalities, procedural loopholes, or gaps in statutory coverage to retain property or advantages obtained unfairly. Equity ensures that the law does not become an instrument of exploitation, particularly in a fast evolving technological advancement where new forms of wrongdoing can emerge faster than legislation can adapt. Having explored this foundational maxim, let us now move on to the second principle. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. This maxim reflects the moral dimension of equity. It requires that a claimant seeking equitable relief must not have engaged in wrongful or unethical conduct related to the very matter of the claim. Historically, the court of chancery positioned itself as a court of conscience, emphasizing fairness over rigid legal formalism. Relief was discretionary and was granted only to those whose behavior met ethical standards. The rationale behind the maxim is that equity will not aid a wrongdoer. As Stephen 1949 notes, the doctrine ensures that claimants cannot benefit from their own unconscionable acts, preserving both the integrity of the court and public confidence in equitable remedies. Herstein 2011 further explains that the maxim prevents the misuse of discretionary remedies such as injunction, specific performance, or constructive trust, ensuring they are granted to those deserving equitable assistance. For example, in Cotsworth and Johnson 1886, a claimant seeking specific performance was denied relief because he had himself breached the tenancy agreement. In Malaysia, Cheng Chuan Development against Ng Ah Hock 1982 applied the same principle. A claimant who acted unfairly by unilaterally raising the contract price was barred from relying on equitable expropriation. These cases demonstrate that the clean hand maxim is concerned specifically with misconduct connected to the subject matter of the claim, rather than general wrongdoing. The maxim's application can be refined over time. In Tinsley and Milligan 1994, the House of Lords introduced the reliance principle, allowing claimants to succeed if they could establish their claim without relying on their own illegality. Malaysian courts have similarly confirmed this approach. In Fusing Construction Sdn Berhad against Eon Finance Berhad 2000, reliance on one's wrongdoing bar equitable relief, showing that courts will carefully examine the connection between conduct and claim. In contemporary legal practice, the maxim remains highly relevant. In intellectual property disputes, a plaintiff who has infringed rights or misrepresented facts may be denied injunction. In family or property dispute, a spouse who conceals assets or commits fraud may be barred from claiming equitable interest, even in digital and commercial contexts. Individuals exploiting confidential data cannot rely on equitable remedies. Lilienter and Mohammed Hussein 2020 cautioned that courts must carefully reason through applications of the maxim, as it risks being reduced to a mere rhetorical statement if ethical evaluation is overlooked. Ultimately, this maxim functions both as a moral safeguard and a practical mechanism to maintain the integrity of equity. It ensures that discretionary remedies are not available to those who act unconscionably, reinforcing the principle that equitable relief is grounded in fairness and ethical conduct. Now, let's move on to the third and final maxim. Equity looks to the intent rather than the form. This maxim embodies equity's fundamental concern with substance over form. Unlike the common law, which traditionally prioritizes procedural technicalities, equity seeks to ascertain and give effect to the parties' true intentions, ensuring that justice is not defeated by mere formal defects. The maxim reflects the idea that equity regards the spirit rather than the letter of a transaction, particularly in matters of property, trust, and contractual arrangements. Historically, common law courts often refuse to recognize rights unless strict formalities were observed. For example, in property law, failure to comply with formal requirements such as deed execution or registration could invalidate a transfer, even if the parties clearly intended the transfer to take effect. Equity, however, intervened to prevent formalism from frustrating genuine intentions. Cases like Paul and Constance, 1977, illustrate this principle. Despite the absence of a formal trust document, repeated statements and consistent conduct were sufficient to establish and express trust. Equity thus prioritizes conduct and intention over documentation, recognizing the realities of human transactions. Malaysian courts have consistently applied this principle. In Wan Naimat against Wan Muhammad Nawawi, 1974, oral evidence was accepted to demonstrate the existence of a trust over land, highlighting equity's willingness to look beyond technical formalities when determining the party's actual intention. Similarly, in Wan Salima against Mahmud Omar, 1998, Malaysian courts upheld an arrangement that lacked perfect legal term but clearly reflected the party's intent, demonstrating the domestic relevance of the maxim. Equity also scrutinizes the motive behind formal acts, where formalities are used to mask fraud or wrongdoing. Courts will pierce the form to assess true intent. In Midland Bank against White 1995, the trust deed was deemed a shame because it was designed solely to defraud creditors, illustrating that equity is sensitive not only to substance, but also to the morality of intentions. Likewise, in Re Vanderveld's Trust Number 2, 1974, the court looked past the formal transfer of shares to determine beneficial ownership, reinforcing that equity prioritizes the actual allocation of rights over nominal titles. Scholars emphasize this maxim serves several key purposes in modern law. Griffin 2020 notes that it allows courts to balance fairness and certainty, ensuring that justice is not undermined by rigid adherence to form. Lilinter and Muhammad Hussein 2020 warns that if courts fail to reason carefully, the maxim risks becoming mere rhetorical shorthand rather than a genuine tool to enforce substantive rights. In the contemporary context, the maxim is increasingly relevant due to the rise of informal and digital transactions. Agreements executed via text messages, emails, shared digital accounts, or family arrangements may lack traditional formalities. Yet equity can still enforce rights based on intention. For example, in joint digital ventures, contributions of knowledge or resources may establish equitable interests even without written contracts. Equity's focus on intent ensures that legal remedies are responsive to the realities of human and commercial interaction, preventing injustice that could rise from strict procedural formalism. Ultimately, this maxim reflects the core ethos of equity. Court must interpret transactions in light of what the parties truly intend, rather than being constrained by the outward appearance of formal compliance. By doing so, equity preserves justice, prevents exploitation of technical loopholes, and ensures that the law remains a living instrument attuned to social and commercial realities. Now, in conclusion, the three equitable maxims discussed form the intellectual and formal foundation of equity. The first maxim guarantees that genuine wrongs are not left without remedy. The second preserves the ethical integrity of equitable relief. And the third ensures that substantive intention prevails over rigid formalisms. Even in modern Malaysia, where statutory systems like the National Land Court dominate, these maxims guide judicial reasoning, prevent injustice, and adapt to technological and societal change. As law evolves from handwritten deeds to digital contracts and from tangible property to electronic assets, equity remains flexible, principled, and humane. These maxims are active, living principles ensuring fairness, conscience, and justice today. Equity is not just an old tradition, it's a flexible and fair system that helps the law achieve justice and treat people fairly. Now, thank you for your attention. This will be my references for this presentation. Thank you.